Hello everyone, it's Lawrence here from Unicorn Reviews with the first chapter on Racing for Dummies, How to Go Fast, Hardware and Software Optimization. What we're going to do is we're going to look into how you can make your PC perform at its best so that you can go a lot faster, because frame times and frame rates cause inaccuracies and inconsistency. And we're also going to look into your seating position. We're going to look into how to set up your wheel, pedals, all that sort of stuff. So this is really the nerdy part where you do a lot of setup stuff. Not set up on the car, but set up on the actual physical stuff. Alright, the first step on making your hardware more optimized. In my case I have 3 connectors, so I have my pedals, my wheel and wheel buttons, and obviously it won't focus, and the G27 connector. Now I could go and put them right there in the front USB. Do not use front USB ever, unless for quick stuff like memory sticks. Also don't use front audio. So we're going to put the pedals, and obviously USB always works on the first go. The pedals and the buttons on the SRW wheel, which you will see later. We're going to put that in our left USB hub. Because of the way USB hubs work, they actually divide polling rate and bandwidth over a hub. So every USB port is not an actual port, it's part of a hub inside of your USB chip. And then because of that, we're going to take the G27 connector and plug it into a completely other USB hub. This increases the polling rate on each device and will therefore also reduce input lag. Simple maths. Another really important thing if you're gonna race online is this guy right here. Do not use Wi-Fi ever. Like, just don't use Wi-Fi, it's shit. And that's pretty much it, other than sound, which for me is also a USB device. But should you be using just the audio jacks, make sure to plug them into the back of your motherboard, not the front, because there will be more latency and a lot of distortion from the electrical components influencing each other. Next up is the seat. Now you could use a desk chair on wheels, but then when you're gonna use your brake pedal, you'll just push yourself backwards, and it's gonna be incredibly annoying, and again, it'll make you suck terribly. You could put something on the wheels to prevent it from sliding backwards, but then you still have rotation. So we do not want that. So I went with a really cheap bucket seat. The reason for those is that they're quite like the real thing, and you can easily, if they come with seat gliders like this one, you can quite easily make yourself a wooden box to put it on. And once you have done that, you can use your seat glider. Instead of using it to go backwards and forwards, you can use it to go up and down if it would actually not be stuck. Now another really, I think it's a brilliant invention of mine, and this will probably be a bit dirty, but is this on camera? Yes, it is. So this is gliding stuff. So this slides very easily. And then I also have this, which is 2 mouse mats, rubberized mouse mats, with double-sided tape right here in the center. Now when you're not sitting on it, you can slide it around easily. But when you are sitting on it, these compress and the chair won't move without ever scratching your floor. You could of course also just mount it in a fixed configuration, but I guess for many people that's not possible due to size restrictions. Alright guys, one of the most important parts in your setup is arguably your pedal set. Reason for that is the brake pedal is the most important one. It's where you gain most of the lap time over other people. Because, you know, in the rest of the video I'm gonna tell you to not use ABS ever. So it's important, if you don't have ABS, that your brake pedal is set up quite well. Now, the basic rule for me is put the throttle and the brake as far apart as you possibly can. And then also put the brake pedal as high up as your foot can still reach, because you want the ball of your foot to be right in the middle of your brake pedal for optimum leverage and pressure, and more importantly pressure control. Now on the right, your throttle stiffness wise, I mean, a lot of you won't really be able to set it because you're using, you know, G27s probably, or DFGTs. So pressure wise, your throttle pedal really isn't important. It's just a fear switch really. Like full throttle should be fear, no throttle should be I'm good. That's all your throttle pedal does. A clutch pedal, who the hell uses a clutch pedal anyway? But just set it up properly. Most important thing is to have your brake pedal almost vertically, so that the direction of the force is perpendicular to the face on which you're pressing, so that your foot doesn't start sliding around. That's pretty much the only important part. And then also, if you're going to do heel and toe, make sure you can still reach the throttle. If you're having one of those play seats with a bar straight through the middle here, make sure that you can access the brake pedal with your left foot if you're going to be driving prototypes and formula cars. Other than that, pretty simple. If you're driving normal GT cars and you for some reason still want to use a clutch, which people stopped using in the 90s, just put your clutch all the way on the left and, you know, slide the other two a bit to the right so that you can access it rather easily. That's pretty much all about brake pedals. So for those of you who are still to build their rig and who haven't done setting up stuff yet, pretty basic rule is that when your foot, and again I'm using the brake pedal because it's the most important pedal, your leg should reach some sort of half stretched state. So you don't want a leg that's completely, you know, flat, but you also don't want to be sitting like this because it's just uncomfortable and you can't really put a lot of pressure like this. You want semi-stretched so that you can really push onto it and have it also in a position where you can modulate how much force you're using or how much travel you're using with slightly cheaper pedals. Then there's also the height of your brake pedals. As you can see with my pedals, can I like do a dolly like effect? I can, apparently. As you can see, they're quite far off the ground, despite my seat being rather close to the ground. So what I try to do here is create a sort of formula / prototype sitting position where the pedal, well, the pedal box, so this ankle plate here, the heel rest, is about 5 to 10 centimeters lower than where your butt sits. Obviously, going out again, your butt sits quite a bit lower than, you know, this part of your legs. Also, this is probably a good idea to actually demonstrate that my seat rail works. So I got the lever here, and I can then slide it backwards, but because the plate here is at an angle, I can actually slide it up or down, which is quite helpful. Okay, so now that we've talked through everything that has to do with input, we're gonna see how we can optimize what we actually get back from the game, because that's where most gains can be had. First of all, if you're using one of these old VGA cables, just take them and throw them away because they're shit. You're going to use a DVI or an HDMI cable. Now, if you don't know what those are, HDMIs are USB-like but with chamfered edges on the bottom, and DVI are the white ones. Or you could also use DisplayPort, but whatever. Basically, the top of your screen should be on the same height as the top of your head. That is pretty much, you know, where you want your screen to be. If you're using multiple monitors, which sadly I cannot do, because, well, quite simply, my graphics card isn't powerful enough with Project Card at the moment. Make sure that you kind of overlap the bezels so that you're not losing too much from those bezels, and angle wise put them so that the can you guys actually see that? Yeah, the edge of the outer screen is somewhere in front of the face of your wheel. Another very important aspect of racing is knowing where your opponents are at all times, because you don't want them to surprise you when they're attacking you, or when you're overtaking someone you don't want them to still be next to you when you cut back or something. So something really important is a proper headset. Now, headsets aren't expensive, so you should just get one. In-ear stuff is also great, but whatever you do, don't use only speakers at the front, because the sound is coming from here. Your head is not inside at the moment, so say the sound comes from here, your head is about here. The sound will reach both of your ears at the same time, so your brain has no time to calculate where the object would be, whereas with a headset you don't have that problem. Now, there are companies who for some reason sell surround headsets, which is total bullshit, because you only have 2 ears really, so why would you need sound coming from 7 different places at once? It just makes no sense. So just get a proper headset, don't use front mounted speakers. If you are using surround, make sure it's a proper surround system. Alright, now for the most important part in setting up your system so that it actually benefits you compared to others. What's going to happen when you turn a wheel, push a pedal, shift a gear, is an electrical signal will have to be put into your computer, it has to be processed, and it has to be shown on your screen. And that is going to take time. Now, say it takes about 10 milliseconds for the turning action on your wheel to get into the computer, get processed. Let's say that's 10 milliseconds. And then it takes another 10 milliseconds for the image to get out of your computer and on your screen. That's 20 milliseconds. Now, how about we're doing 100 miles an hour, which is probably a bit optimistical for most sort of races. Then those 20 milliseconds, it's 2 meters, which, I mean, 2 meters of accuracy purely lost in latency between the wheel and the screen. It's still less than you get with most cars nowadays in real life, but yeah, that's just because most new cars are shit. But for a game, we want to get that latency or lag between input and output as low as we possibly can. How are we going to do that? Well, there's free software called MSI Afterburner, which is based on Riva Tuner. And it's just a piece of software that lets you both overclock your system, or well, at least your graphics card, but it also gives you a bunch of information. Now, to enable this, first of all, you install this. Go to settings, monitoring. You can even set custom fan profiles, by the way. But you go to monitoring, you can log it to a file. When it exceeds a certain file size, you can just say stop logging please, which is kind of helpful. So let's turn that on. And then you can say what sort of stuff you want to show in this graph here on the left. Now, all of this shit is probably not too important. The only thing we're really interested in is frame rate and frame time. Now, you could say if I get 60 FPS, then frame time is 1/60th of a second, right? In general, on average, yes, but it is possible for some frames to arrive earlier than other frames. So you can get, when you're having 60 FPS, you can get you know, maybe a 15 millisecond frame time, or a 20 or a 10, kind of depends. So we're going to turn these two on. So you click on it, you can use the tick here to show it in the graph, but you can then also show it in the on-screen display. You then go to on-screen display, define a key to turn it on, and press OK. Another important thing we're going to use is our Windows Task Manager. Now, in Task Manager you can just see your CPU usage, which is completely useless because we're seeing the total of our CPU. We're not seeing what each core is doing. In some games are multi-threaded optimized, others aren't. So you press resource monitor, put it on a full screen so you can see all 4 of your cores or all 8 of your threads or 2 of your cores, whatever, but you want to see all of them at the same time. Now I'm just going to rearrange a few things here and then we're going to go in game. Okay guys, so when you have Afterburner all set up, you're just going to go to your keyboard, press whatever button you set to use the toggle, and then here in the corner you specified, you can see your whatever you set really. So I can see FPS and frame time. So I'm running 70 or 67.1 FPS at 14 milliseconds frame time. More importantly though, is that I can see it right here. And let's just zoom in for a bit. So on my secondary screen I can now see the usage of each core. So we can see we're not CPU limited, even though we're getting a bit close, probably around 70% of our CPU is being used. And here we see our GPU usage, but we're not interested in that. We're interested in frame rate and frame time. Okay, so now that we're in the game, we can go for a drive. So what you do is you pretty much take the worst case scenario, which in my case is Nürburgring GP on Project Cars. It's terrible FPS at the moment, but we can see we're getting 51 FPS and 20 millisecond frame times, which is, I guess, still acceptable, but as I said, 20 milliseconds, that is 2 meters. So it looks like everything's happening right away, but it's really not, and you're losing some accuracy because of it. Now, the way to get better stuff like this is exactly what I'm going to show you all right now. First of all, you really analyze this stuff, and it can be helpful to occasionally look at your GPU usage, because as you can see with mine, it's at the top but not always, because I have limited my frame rates in Afterburner itself. Right here in monitoring you can just say frame rates, and then you can set a maximum amount of frames that you want. There we go. So then in your game, when you're not reaching whatever frame rate the monitor can handle, because these are 75 Hz IPS monitors, what you're going to do... Alright, so once we've established our frame rates, we're going to have to change your graphical settings accordingly. So basic rule is 60 FPS is a minimum. Anything above it is great. Now the most important thing you do is this guy right here, VSync. You turn it off. No matter what, you always leave VSync off, because what VSync does is it waits to, well, you know, when an image arrives in your screen it goes line by line. That's, you know, normal. What VSync does is it waits for the entire screen to be received and then put it on the screen. Well, not received, rendered, and then it puts everything out. So when you get really high FPS, you might see some tearing, which is just lines running around your screen, which is incredibly annoying. But it's nowhere near as annoying as not having, well, as having VSync on and having to wait for the frame to arrive every time, which could be another 5 milliseconds, which is 50 centimeters of lost accuracy. But you know, at least to my reasoning. So VSync is always off. You just, if you get too much FPS, so let's say you get 200 FPS or something, just set everything to maximum, and if that doesn't work, you set a maximum frame limit using software like Afterburner, but you never use VSync. Point. Now, when you notice your settings, say you get 30 FPS, just lower them a bit. If you get 100 FPS, you can increase them a bit, and you want to be somewhere around 70 FPS in single player, so that when multiple cars and multiplayer stuff starts happening, you get around 60 FPS all the time. That's, you know, what we're aiming for. Something else that may be limiting your performance you get from your computer is memory or CPU availability. So maybe your CPU is at 100%. In that case, there's not really a lot you can do. You could go to your processes, see what's taking up a lot of CPU stuff, and just turn it off. That's one way to deal with it. And then obviously if you for some reason are running out of memory, again, look at what's using most memory, like this guy right here. Dropbox is using 65 entire megabytes of memory, so you can just turn that off as well. Alright, so that was mostly it for optimizing your computer. About the frame times. The only way you can really optimize it is by going with higher frame rates and keeping all of your drivers updated at all times. Same for your input devices, keep everything updated. It will save you a bunch of time and even more annoyance, because what's more annoying than getting stuttering, for example. So keep everything updated. Now, if you haven't seen the first part, chapter 0 of this series of videos, please have a look in the channel. If you liked this part and you want to see the extra parts where I'm actually going to tell you how to go really fast in games or real life, subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave a comment if you have any questions. That's what I'm here for, really. So comment away, but read the other comments before posting something yourself, obviously. And yeah, have fun gaming, have fun racing, be it in real life or in video games.